Hello and welcome to the podcast for Christians United for God and Country and the United States Prayer Force. I'm Steve D. along with Pastor Vince. We're here on Saturday. Excuse me. If you're listening for the first time, we're glad you're here. We're here to draw attention to the need for prayer in America. We're calling on the Lord God for a revival to take place in America. It's one of our key prayer points. It's prayer point number 1 on our list of 7. We're praying for revival, first of all, in our own hearts and lives. We're praying for revival in our families' lives. We're praying for it in our churches, most of all. And then, if all goes well, we're praying that a revival would take place right here in America and that America would turn to God. Because I think if you look at what's going on in our country right now, the only way we're going to continue on as the great country that we have been for the last 250 years or so is for God to intervene. There's so much going on right now in our government with our current administration. And I always say this in every podcast, and that is we're not coming here as a political broadcast, but there's no way to avoid it. If you're going to pray for America, you're praying about a lot of political issues. You're praying for people in political positions of power. And if you look at our prayer list of 7, we'd love to send this to you. Send us an email and we'll get it to you. We're praying that God would raise up godly men and women who would run for public office and influence what's going on in this country. Lots of things to talk about, and you know what they are. We're just going to touch on a few here today, and most of all, we'd love to hear from you. ChristiansUnited50@gmail.com is the email address. Send us a message. Ask us a question. Criticize us. Call us names. Whatever you feel like doing, do it. We'd love to hear from you. First of all, Pastor, as most people know in the news, if you are in tune with the news, the United States has conducted strikes against targets in Iraq and Syria after the Middle East drone attack had killed 3 American soldiers. U.S. warplanes unleashed a barrage of 85 strikes on Friday against Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Force and militias in Iraq and Syria. This is, of course, linked to what happened on that Sunday attack in Jordan that killed those 3 soldiers, 3 American soldiers. The airstrikes used 125 precision munitions, according to U.S. Central Command. The targets included rockets, missiles, drones, and logistics systems used by those militias to attack U.S. troops and facilities. And what we hear from the U.S. government is that the United States does not seek conflict in the Middle East. A little bit late for that. Or anywhere else in the world. President Joe Biden said in a statement announcing the attacks, "But let all those who might seek to do us harm know this: if you harm an American, we will respond." Okay. How that respond is shaking out is debatable. I've heard on a lot of news reports, a lot of military experts are saying that the attacks they're undertaking are, what's the word? They're not really going after the source of the problem, which technically is Iran. They don't want to create a war with Iran. I understand that. I'm not saying we should either, but they're just kind of like blowing up empty buildings and this and that. Another report says that they actually killed 40 people in those countries. Now the whole thing is just dreadful. We're not calling for war. We're not calling for violence to take place in the Middle East, but the Middle East has been a place of violence throughout its entire history. And people were wondering if Joe Biden and his administration was going to respond. Apparently they have. And I guess we have to wait, Pastor, a little longer to see how this will shake out. Are they going to continue the response to take out some of these Iranian proxy groups? And will things escalate? I think they're horrified at the possibility of this escalating into another war. And I think one of the reasons they're afraid of that is because they're afraid they're going to have to put boots on the ground at some point. And, we just got out of Afghanistan in the most dreadful manner. I shudder to think how the Biden administration would conduct a fresh new war with anyone like Iran. It makes me quite nervous. Any thoughts on the subject?
Well, in regard to what took place, all right, the Biden administration was forced to do something because, as you said, 3 American soldiers were killed,
right,
and so they had to respond. However, for the longest period of time, going back to the Obama administration, you've had America while we pay lip service to supposedly recently, being behind Israel and wanting, to defend Israel, so forth and so on. But on the other hand, funneling millions of dollars and billions of dollars, all right, into Iran through the sale of their oil and through other UN organizations, which have been pro-Hamas, pro-Iran. And so really, you can't have it both ways. Either you're going to be for Israel and you're going to be against Iran, or vice versa.
Right.
All right. And, most everybody realizes that you can't be pro-Iranian because, they want to destroy the nation of Israel. So, as I said, you have a hypocrisy going on in regard to our government. They say one thing, they do another. And even in regard to the response. All right. Was it enough? Did it accomplish anything? And so
that remains to be seen. Yeah, obviously. You got to go back to the Obama administration and that report where an airplane loaded up with millions of dollars was sent out to Iran. This is that ideology of appeasement. Maybe if we pay them enough money, they'll just lay low and they won't bother anybody. That's not going to happen because most of the folks that operate in Iran, their Muslim religion, their goal is to wipe out Israel.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with, we want to have, the pursuit of happiness doesn't seem to be high on their list.
The fact of the matter is, all right, there are so many Jews, okay, in America that they know that if they were to become really what they are and profess themselves to be anti-Israel, they would have many people in the political realm turning against them.
So,
right. So it's a con job.
It's a con job. Political. Everything's politically driven. It's not based on truth or what's on righteousness. It's based on, what can we do to stay in power? And,
and you have many in the Biden administration who are pro-Iranian and they're anti-Israel.
Maybe so.
No, it's not. It is so. It's the fact of the matter.
Right. Moving on to another topic here. Here's one interesting, a little closer to us here in the New York City area. New York City will soon launch a $53 million pilot program to hand out prepaid credit cards to immigrant families housed in hotels, folks who came across the southern border, most of them illegally. The New York Post reported that 500 migrant families at the Roosevelt Hotel will receive these prepaid cards to help them buy food. The program is intended to replace the current food service provided there, the Post reported. Not only will this provide families with the ability to purchase fresh food for their culturally relevant diets and the baby supplies of their choosing, but the pilot program is expected to save New York City more than $600,000 per month and more than $7.2 million annually. That's what a spokesperson for New York City Mayor Eric Adams had to say. How can giving out migrant credit cards save money for the city? I don't know how that works. I'm not saying that it's wrong. I just don't see how handing out money saves money. I don't see it. Also, I can't help but bring up the fact that we have many, many homeless people wandering the streets of New York City. Many, many homeless people wandering the streets all across this country. And nobody ever thought to hand them a prepaid credit card so that they could buy healthy food or find a place to live. What is really going on here? This goes back to this whole issue of the border being wide open and the Biden administration letting people in from all over the world. What is the reason for the open border? There's a lot of reasons. What do you think it is, Pastor?
Well, it's insanity.
Yep.
I just recently was reading a story about a woman, an Iranian woman, okay, who came across the border and entered the United States. She went from Iran, and I believe then it was to Cuba, and then she went to maybe to Panama, and then ultimately she migrated up through the United States border. All right, so not only do you have people coming, from South America, so forth and so on, they are coming from all over the world.
True.
They're not being vetted. We don't know who they are.
Right.
We don't know their evil intent.
Right.
And yet it's just being allowed to happen.
Right. What about the homeless veterans on the street? Those who served in the military, went through hard times, maybe suffering from things like PTSD and all these kinds of things. What about them? Why does our current administration not care about them as much as they care about these people coming from foreign countries illegally? They're not even using the laws of the United States to get here. They're completely lawbreakers, yet the current administration in New York City has an open hand to is this a massive virtue signal of some type? Because I don't see any virtue in letting the homeless people starve and suffer that are Americans and that served in this country. It doesn't make any sense. And then take these other folks who are claiming asylum. I'm sure some of them are claiming asylum, but I guarantee you there's a vast
many of
majority
them
that are not.
They're
right?
claiming asylum. Yes.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like your ticket in. If you can't, that's the only word you need to say: asylum, and off you go. You're in. I mean, it's not like we don't have hearts for those people, but they have countries. If they stayed in their own country and improved their own country, I mean, I understand that there are gangs and cartels and all these things, but why do those countries that harbor the cartels and harbor these gangs, why do they not rise up against them? I know that one country did, El Salvador, and there's a president in El Salvador who said, we're going to have law and order here. He rounded up the gangs and he did it in a very forceful way. And they say right now that the country of El Salvador is a safer country to live in than the United States is now in most major cities. Mm-hmm. It's an amazing story. But anyway, New York City handing out money to those illegal aliens. It kind of motivates you to want to go in through the southern border and get a handout, doesn't it? But I don't get it. Anyway.
Well, mention the thing that just took place in New York City
regarding those. Yeah, the police officers.
Yes.
Police officers were attacked in Times Square by some illegal aliens. They were beaten by multiple illegal aliens. When I saw the video, it looked to me that the police officers, yes, they were sort of fighting back, but certainly the police officers are not allowed to carry what was called the billy club. Remember the stick that was used? Mm-hmm. And it looked to me that the police officers were merely wrestling with them as they were being kicked.
Yeah, well, really what you had take place. Okay, this was in Times Square.
Yeah.
I mean, a major place where businesses are,
tourists
are, and everything else. All right, so a fight broke out between some of these illegal immigrants. The police intervened, mm-hmm. seeking to stop the fight. Mm-hmm. And when they sought to, stop what was going on, then they were attacked, mm-hmm. okay, by these several others, 5 of them being arrested. All right. Not only were they arrested, okay, when they got arrested, they were brought to the, police precinct, whatever. And then they were let out immediately without a bond.
Right.
Okay. And then they got on buses. And if you look at the video, as one of them was being arrested or brought out of the police precinct, so forth, so on,
no, it was
making
more
an
than
obscene
one.
gesture.
It was a couple of
them, that, and so now they are on, supposedly, and I believe that it's accurate, they are on buses headed for California. Mm-hmm. So you assault a police officer, all right, you get arrested, you get let out without a bond, and then
there was
the state of New York and the city of New York gives you a free bus ticket, all right, all the way to California. You try doing that. You go and assault a police officer, guess what's going to happen to you? You're going to get arrested. You're going to get thrown in jail. You're not going to be able to get out unless you can pay a pretty high bond. All right. And, but hey, if you are an illegal, and the word is illegal immigrant, all right, it's not only free food, free housing, free healthcare, a free pass.
It's a free for all. It's a get out of jail free. Mm-hmm. Didn't even go to jail to begin with. It's a mysterious, confounding, and confusing situation that's going on in this country right now, especially in the area of law and order. And I know, Pastor, you've got some things to talk about in regards to the Department of Justice. Justice in America is no longer blind. You remember the statue that you used to see? It was a woman with a blindfold on and holding the scales of justice. That's all gone. Let me touch on one more story quickly here, Pastor, before we move on. The New York Times deserves a gold star for this little article that they printed up, and it was one of their opinion columnists whose name was Pamela Paul. She wrote an article that says transgender activists are pushing ideological extremism by recommending gender medical operations as the cure-all for young people confused by their own bodies or their own youth, rather than trying to get them some help psychologically first. The medical establishment is cooperating with these extremists. Extreme transgender ideology states that the medical world is expected to affirm a young person's assertion of gender identity and even provide medical treatment before or even without exploring other possible sources of distress, the column states, noting that there are many who think there should be more caution when it comes to recommending gender transition treatments. I'm glad somebody is standing up in a major newspaper like the New York Times and getting the truth out there. Children, young people who are kind of falling victim to this transgender ideology that it's running through their schools and through the social media. And all of a sudden they look in the mirror and they start wondering, well, I wonder if I'm transgender. And then they start talking themselves into it. I don't know how it works, but it's obvious that they're not getting any type of counseling or psychological diagnoses or anything like
they're
that.
getting, in fact, let me give you something that happened recently that I saw in the news.
Yeah.
Right. This happened in the state of New York, where you had a girl that was going to public school, 12 years of age. She was being bullied in school along with some other girls. And so the mother notified the school regarding about this bullying project this situation. And so then the school began to give this girl counseling.
Yes.
Okay. Unbeknownst to the mother, okay, this counselor was starting to have this 12-year-old girl who was going through, she was depressed. That's why the mother contacted the school, because she was being bullied in school, started having her identify as a boy.
Right.
And this was going on for a period of time. And the mother finally found out about it. And now she has a lawsuit, against the school.
Right.
But here you have a situation where counseling was needed. All right.
Yeah.
And this counselor is trying to get this girl to identify. The girl wasn't going to school saying, I feel like I'm a boy.
No.
She's going to school because she's depressed.
Yeah, I'm being bullied. I don't know how to deal with it.
The counselor's trying to get her to identify as a boy.
As if that's going to solve the problem. This is what I'm saying. We're talking about law and order. We're talking about morals in this country. We're talking about the simple identity of male and female in the human race. Not only the human race, but male and female exists in all levels of animal life. If you know what I mean. I mean, I'm getting to the point of great exasperation hearing more of these stories, and I'm sure lots of Americans are. And with an upcoming election, you've got to listen to the candidates. We're not here to tell you who to vote for, but listen to the candidates. Look at their track records. Look at the things they stand for and vote accordingly. Vote for the ones that you think will fight for your values. That's something I think we can say on this podcast without too much trouble. That's it. What I have on observations we're making about America. Reasons to pray for America. You got to pray for this country. Prayer is the power that we have. It's the prayer power that we need to use. And it's really our last resort because America's going down the drain. Pastor.
Okay. I have a question to start out, and I'm going to give you the answer to it. But the question is this. Is it the Department of Justice, the DOJ, or is it really the Department of Injustice? And here's the case that I want to bring before you. First of all, on Tuesday of this past week, 6 pro-life activists were found guilty in a federal court in the state of Tennessee for violating the FACE Act. Now, the FACE Act is this: freedom of access to clinic entrances. Freedom of access to clinic entrances. That means, all right, anybody who wanted to have an abortion had to have free access to get into that, abortion clinic.
Sure.
This goes back 3 years when the event actually took place. On March 5th, 2021, a group of protesters blocked the Carafem Health Center in Joliet, Tennessee. It's an abortion clinic about 17 miles east of Nashville. And the protesters, which included children and elderly people, all right, were in a hallway that led to the clinic. And they were there and they were praying and singing.
Yes.
A police officer ultimately came and he entered the building, told those that were in the hallway they had to vacate and take their protests outside. And most everybody that was in the hallway left the building. However, there were some that still remained praying and singing, and they ultimately were arrested. 11 were actually arrested at that time. But this past week, 6 had been put on trial, and they were found guilty of violating the FACE Act. And these 6 pro-life demonstrators are facing, now that they've been found guilty, they haven't been sentenced yet, but they can be sentenced up to 10 and a half years in a federal prison and receive fines up to $260,000 each.
Right.
And one of these protesters was a man by the name of Paul Vaughn. When he was arrested, I guess shortly after this all took place, the FBI came to his home, all right, on a weekday. He and his wife were in their home on a weekday, getting their kids ready to go to school. And at least maybe 6, no less than 6, maybe as many as 8 FBI agents came, all right, to his home with their guns drawn, all right, and they arrested him, handcuffed him, and took him off to jail with his wife and his children watching.
Yes.
All right. Now, just so everybody realizes that this protest took place about a year before the Supreme Court overruled and overturned, Roe versus Wade. And so pretty much now in the state of Tennessee, it's abortion has been mostly banned. So this took place before all that had transpired.
Mhm.
And the lawyers who were, representing these 6 protesters plan on appealing, these convictions. Now, that's what the government did to these people who were peacefully protesting. Now, you might say, well, they shouldn't have been there. And the police officer told them to get out, so forth and so on. I'm not discussing any of that. Okay. Maybe because they didn't do that. Maybe, they could have been arrested for some things, but really 10 and a half years in prison. Okay. Fines up to $260,000, all, being brought upon these people by the Department of Injustice.
Yeah.
Now, contrast that with this. Remember, in the summer of 2020, you had protests, all right, taking place all across America, various cities, and because of, they call them the George Floyd protests. And in those protests, public, all right, government buildings were destroyed, private property was destroyed, and depending on what you're reading, possibly to the amount of what amounted to $2 billion in damages.
Right.
All right. And now, while you might have some that are saying, well, there were people that were arrested, so forth and so on. Yes, but the question is, what happened to them? Are they facing incarceration? Are they facing multiplied thousands of dollars in fines? Or were they just like these illegal immigrants in New York City, slapped on the wrist, all right, and released? And really anything they did in regard to, destroying private property, government property, rioting, looting, so forth and so on, they were just let go.
Don't worry about it.
Okay. So, you can break the law, and riot and destroy property and get away with it. But if you,
Mere
peacefully
protest.
protest, in front of an abortion clinic, you're the bad.
10 years in jail, potentially, and $250,000 fine.
Okay.
Hard to believe.
So that's one situation regarding the, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland. He's the one that's behind all this. And if you want to, they're trying to right now impeach Alejandro Mayorkas because he hasn't, done what he's supposed to do in regard to, the border and so forth. The head of Homeland Security. Well, this guy, Merrick Garland, you know what he is? He's a devil.
But they're just doing what their boss told them to
That's
do.
it.
Or whoever's running their boss. I don't know who that is, but
yeah.
it is said that Joe Biden is not really in charge of much up there. He's just a puppet. Go ahead.
But anyways, now here's another situation regarding the hypocrisy that's going on in the American judicial system. Most of you are aware of this. On January the 6th, 2021, Ashley Babbitt, who was a wife and a military veteran, was gunned down and killed by Lieutenant Michael Byrd a Capitol police officer. Remember, this took place in the Capitol building during the days of those protests. Now, Ashley Babbitt was not rioting. Ashley Babbitt was not destroying, government property
She
in
wasn't
the
threatening
Capitol building. She
anybody?
wasn't threatening anybody.
Nope.
She was there in the building, yes. And in fact, if you go back to some of the video in regard to what took place prior to her being shot by Lieutenant Byrd, you recall, if you ever watched anything like that, there were these men, and they had us maybe some. They were trying to break the windows in order to get access into another part of the Capitol,
Right.
and so she actually went up to one of those men, all right, who was seeking to break the window in order to get access into the building, and she punched him in the face.
Oh, wow.
Okay, in order to stop him.
Mm-hmm.
And then you recall that there were at that time there were 3 police officers, Capitol police officers in front of the door, and then they walked away to the side of the room, and then Ashley gets shot and killed. And after she got shot, you don't see this either, but this is all coming out in the facts.
Yes.
All right. There were 2 men who sought to assist her. Both of these men had medical backgrounds.
Right.
One of them was a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so this doctor is over Ashley Babbitt, trying to render her medical assistance. All right. After now she's been shot. And the Capitol Police come into the area inside of the building where she was, and they take this medical doctor who's trying to help this woman who's been shot. They take him away. And then another man who was also trying to give her assistance, he was also ushered away by the Capitol Police. Now, they were prevented from aiding her in their rescue efforts in order to save her life.
Right.
Aaron Babbitt, who is Ashley's husband, has now filed a $30 million lawsuit
Wrongful death.
with the help of Judicial Watch.
Mm-hmm.
All right. In regard to, a wrongful death
Gotcha.
suit against the American government. And hopefully, with the prayers of God's people and, with the lawyers that are representing her, they'll win that case. And when all the facts come out, all right, and all the facts that are really true, all right, it's clear that Ashley Babbitt should not have been shot. Ashley Babbitt should be alive today.
Yes.
Okay. $30 million lawsuit, wrongful death suit, being brought against the U.S. government by her husband. Now, again, in contrast to that, recently, this past week or so in the state of New York, a woman, you've probably heard about her. Her name is E. Jean Carroll. She's the woman that accused Donald Trump of sexually assaulting her back in the 1990s.
That's right.
She says it happened in 1993 or 1995, more than 20 years ago, but she can't remember the year that it took place. All right, she says he raped her. All right,
it's almost
in the
30 years
room
ago.
of a department store.
30 years.
30 years ago. Excuse me.
Just about.
All right, 30 years. Excuse me. All right. He raped her, but she can't remember what year or what day it took place.
Right.
Well, Donald Trump was in that trial found guilty of sexually assaulting her. And then E. Jean Carroll brought another lawsuit against our ex-president there. And because she said he publicly defamed her. It was a defamation lawsuit. And she said in the suit, this suit goes back, it was originally filed in 2019. All right. And she claimed that the ex-president Trump damaged her and defamed her publicly when he called her allegations of sexual assault against her a con job. And not only that, but she just did it to sell books. And she claims that Trump lied and shattered her reputation. And we don't have time to get into Miss Carroll's past, but if you read anything that she has said, all right, about her past, what she has been known to have said in regard to the past, all right, she's definitely a sick, demented woman. On one case where she was being interviewed, she said, rape is sexy. Okay. And so this woman, all right, in this lawsuit was awarded $83.3 million.
That's a miscarriage of justice.
Okay.
Right.
Now, that's what's going on in regard to the injustice that's taking place, all right, in the American court system today.
Yeah.
You have an innocent woman gets killed by a Capitol police officer, all right, a detailed investigation, which was supposedly carried out, that actually supposedly took place where she was killed. They filed a report, but it had numerous errors and false statements in the report, and it absolved Lieutenant Byrd of any wrongdoing.
Doesn't make sense.
Okay, and that's a $30 million lawsuit that Aaron Babbitt is bringing against the United States government.
Right.
And on the other hand, you have a woman in a state court, not a federal court, all right, has nothing to do here with the Department of Injustice, but she wins an $83.3 million suit
For
all right,
defamation.
for defamation.
How
And
many, in a case like that, defamation, it has to produce damages in a person's life for you to be awarded some compensation. Did that woman suffer $83 million worth of damage because of the things Trump was saying to defend his position? It doesn't make sense to me. It's obviously a miscarriage of justice.
That's
If, whether or not Donald Trump has to pay that money to her remains to be
Right.
seen. There'll be
Naturally,
appeals.
yes, there's going to be appeals.
and-
I
and-
read one article
but-
recently,
yeah.
all right, and it gave 25 reasons why, all right, in the appeal process,
Yeah.
that Donald Trump will never pay this woman a dime. Maybe it is, maybe that hopefully, is going to be the case. However, she was awarded $83.3 million as of now.
Right. The whole case kind of originated with her accusations that Donald Trump sexually raped her in a
Department store.
changing room in a department store.
Mhm.
Now, I know Donald Trump's been a wild guy his whole life, but he didn't seem to descend to that level of depravity. That's just an opinion. Sure, he's a wild and crazy guy, as
Well,
Steve Martin used to say, but
He was found guilty of sexual assault. Now,
what did they have for
okay.
evidence? What was the evidence?
They had no evidence other than it was he said, she said, or she
Right.
said, he
Right.
said.
So then how
She
then
said
can
he
they
did, he said he different. However, because of one time of things that he has said in the past in
Mhm.
regard to women,
Mhm.
they said because he has made these statements, then it's possible that he actually did commit this crime. Therefore, he was guilty of sexual assault. But they
Most-
had no evidence in
No.
regard to it.
Most of these people,
That'd be like saying, well, you know what? This guy has a criminal background. And even though we don't have any evidence that he actually did this person said that he did it. And so he has to be guilty.
have you ever been in a football locker room, whether in the high school level or the college level? I've been in both.
Mhm.
I didn't have a big football career because I'm not a big guy, but I wanted to play. I love that game. I wanted to get involved in it. I played other sports too. And I've been in a lot of locker rooms. And if you could hear the way guys talk about girls, Donald Trump is no different. Guys talk about women, guys talk about girls. I'm talking about the non-Christian ones, if you know. And just because you talk about girls a certain way and you claim this and you brag about that, that doesn't serve as evidence for what you may or may not have done in an isolated situation. I just had to throw that in. I don't know why, but it's just our justice system is more than flawed. It's corrupt now. It is corrupt. And that is why we're here talking like crazy, just trying to get your attention and asking you to look at these issues and pray for this country. This country was not perfect in its history. We know that. But this country corrects its wrongs. When slavery existed here, slavery was eliminated here in America.
Can I interject something?
You can.
Okay, you're absolutely correct in saying this country corrected its wrongs,
Yes.
but it corrected its wrongs because people rose up and said, this is wrong.
Right.
And unfortunately, we're living in a day and time where people are just so caught up with their own lives and everything else,
Yeah.
Christians included,
Mhm.
that they're not standing up and they're not saying, this is wrong.
Right.
And that's what has to happen. We have to pray and we have to stand up and say, this is wrong.
Right.
Otherwise,
Right.
these people who are corrupt and wicked will go on their corrupt and wicked way.
One last question, Pastor, before we sign off. Do you think people should have the right to do wrong as long as their wrong does not hurt anybody else? That's an old Playboy philosophy. That was a Hugh Hefner kind of thing.
No, not at all.
Certainly not if you're aligned with the teachings of
Okay.
God and the Bible? No.
If you have
but
you have God's laws,
yes,
and we have man's laws. Many of them are predicated on God's laws.
yeah,
All right. So if it's wrong, it's wrong. You see,
right,
just like what we're talking about originally in regard to the border.
sure,
Okay. If you cross the border illegally, you broke the law.
right,
Okay.
right,
And ultimately now, maybe when you originally crossed that line and you came illegally into the United States, you didn't hurt anybody,
Sure.
but it's certainly causing a lot of damage because of the
Right.
multiplied millions now that
Sure.
have come here in regard to what we're having to pay in regard to just being able to take care of these people.
sure,
All right. And regarding the crimes that are taking place.
right,
Okay. Those guys who committed those crimes, those 5, ought to be put to jail, in a bad jail. All right. They ought to be sent to Rikers Island in New York City,
yeah,
which is not a good place. And after they've served their sentences, which ought to amount to a good amount of time,
right,
they ought to be deported back to the country of their origination and never be allowed. If they ever cross this border again, they ought to be looking at life imprisonment.
Sure. Well, the only thing I'm saying is that the whole issue of right and wrong, you need a standard by which to measure the issues of life against. And a lot of people out there who do not believe in the Bible, do not believe in God, do not believe that Jesus walked the earth and did the things that the Bible teaches us that he did. They have their own mind and their own heart and soul to declare what's right and wrong. Therefore, they can say, giving children transgender treatments is right. It's helping them. It's saving their lives. They're deceived to thinking.
Not if it's in violation to what the parents want.
Well,
That's
that's
not
for
right.
sure. Exactly. So what I'm saying is, as Christians, we have a standard, and it's the Bible. And we're running a little bit long today. We're heading up towards 38 minutes here. We just wanted to tell you, thank you for listening. If you have any comments, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to comment on anything that interests you. You just have to let us know what it is, and we'd love to hear from you. Once again, I just wanted to remind you that you can go to our website and read some articles there. You can join the United States Prayer Force. You can unite with us in praying for America. We'll send you the Christians United prayer list that we have. And there's a lot more than the 7 that we have here of things to pray for in America. That's why we talk about things. That's why we make observations here on the podcast about what's going on in America. Why do we need to pray? What did America used to be? What did it used to stand for? And we're looking for those issues of right and wrong. We believe that the Bible is our standard for right and wrong. And if you're listening and you agree with that, we hope that you'll join us. Also, if you're so inclined, you'd like to donate to the podcast and to the organization to keep things going, to keep the cry going out for prayer warriors to pray for this country, do so. Send us a letter at Christians United, P.O. Box 2275, Stamford, Connecticut 06906. Visit us on ChristiansUnited50.com. Go to the donate page. There's an easy way to make a donation there. And I got to say this, thank you so much to all of those who have decided to help donate a few dollars just to keep the thing on the air. We're using the money carefully and wisely, exclusively for the podcast and for the gospel message that we're trying to proclaim here today. Thanks for listening, Pastor. Any final words before we sign off?
Well, as you've already said, the most important thing that we can do as Christians is pray for our country
Yes.
and pray for revival, but then take it beyond that. Do something. Write your congressmen, write your senators, vote, and let your voices be heard.
That's right.
To let those who are in places of authority know that what is going on in our country is not acceptable.
Right. Silence is complicit with all that's going wrong in this country. So we're encouraging you, don't be silent. Stand up, talk to your friends and neighbors, speak out for your values.